All right, this video is to help you guys figure out how much tax or how much your taxes would be per year. So the first thing, like I told you yesterday, you're going to need to know your annual salary. So I'm using Naomi's annual salary because she told me I could. So Naomi. And Naomi is going to be making $24,000 per year. Okay, you all should have figured this out because step one was due a long time ago and almost all of you turned it in. So you all should have this number. If you don't, then that's your first step for today is figuring out that number because you can't figure out your taxes without knowing how much you make because it's based on a percent of what you make. So there's a chart in your directions. And remember, the directions can be found on Google Classroom. Also, you have copies of them. I might make new copies, I think. Okay, so you have this chart shows how much you would get taxed based on how much you make. So it has a percent and a dollar amount over here, and then it has the money you make, how much money you make on this side. So if you look at the paper that I gave you guys, it says, I will make this much per year, so my tax is this certain amount plus a percentage of the amount I make over this much. So it's exactly fitting to what the chart has. Okay, so if you make $24,000 a year, the first thing you have to do is find out where that falls on this table. So does she make between 0 and 9,275? No. Does she make between 9,276 and 37,650? Yes. 24,000 is somewhere in the middle there, okay? So this is the column she's going to use, or row, I should say. That's a row, that's a column. So when you have if you have your chart, you should definitely circle the one that fits for your salary just to make it a little bit easier. So now I'm going to use the information in this row to fill in the table, or fill in the worksheet, okay? So my tax rate, how much I pay the government. My tax is this much. $927.50 plus 15%. See how it fits exactly here? The amount I make over 9,275. The way taxes work is they tax you a certain percent up to a certain amount of money. So if you have a fairly low income, they don't tax you that much. They only tax you 10%. And then once you start making more money, they start taxing you more, 15, 25, 28. So the more money you make, the more percent they take. And then once you get to a lot of money, then it caps off at 39.6. So that's a whole nother issue to talk about. But we're not going to do that here. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how taxes work. And this is from some federal website that gave tax information, so it's fairly accurate. So now you have the amount I make over that number. See how there's an arrow from this line here pointing to that number, so you don't have to figure that out again. You just go, it points to there, so I'm going to rewrite that number. The amount I make over 9,275 is, and look, it says need to do math for this part. So I write all these little things in here to help you, but if you ignore them, it's not going to help you. So this is where you need to do math. So the amount Naomi makes over 9,275. How would we do that math? Well, she makes 24,000. How much does she make over this? That's kind of saying how much more does she make than this. So what amount between 9,275 and 24,000? What is that amount in between? So we would use subtraction for that. So I'm going to do the math down here because it says show your work below. So 24,000 minus 9,275. Okay, I'm going to take from the 4, give to that guy. So 10 minus 5, 2, 7. Take from this guy. Okay, and it's project, so you are allowed to use a calculator. I'm just going to check my math. So 24,000 minus 9,275. 14,725. Okay, so I did my math right. That's good. All right. So now the amount I make over this much is 14,725. Okay. And now there's another one of those arrows pointing from the percent up to this 15. So it's like kind of repeating the same thing, but getting different information with each repeating sentence, I guess you could say. So 15% of, there's another arrow, excuse me, is, another need to do math for this part. So now you've figured out how much she makes over 24,000 because your taxes are based on how much you make. So she was taxed this much for the first $9,275. And now she's getting taxed 15% of the amount she makes that's more than that. Okay, so now we have to do 15%. There's a couple different ways you could do percent problems, but what I'm trying to get you guys to figure out is how to do it using a proportion, because you can use a proportion. I used a proportion yesterday with my 8th graders to figure out some really complicated problem, in my opinion. So now we have, so 15% of 14,725. So I'm going to use a proportion. So I always tell you guys to start with the percent. So you're trying to find 15% of a number, this one. So we know that if you're writing a proportion for a percent and you have the percent, we know that that percents are all out of 100. And so it's not like it tells you exactly what to do. You have to understand that when you're making a proportion to solve a percent, you're going to turn that percent into a fraction first. And you're going to equal it to whatever numbers you're trying to figure out. So proportion, remember, is two equal fractions. So I want 15%, this is 15% as a fraction, to be equal to a certain number up here and a certain number down here. So you ask yourself, okay, well, what is 100% of the dollar amount? Do I know 100%? Yes, I do, because I'm trying to find 15%. I know this is the whole number that I'm trying to find the percent of. So this one goes here, right across, or right next to the 100. And then 15% we don't know. So that's your x, okay? So now we have where we use the cross multiplication. I'm going to use pink. So we've set up our proportion, which I think is the hardest part for kids to get used to. So if you still don't get it, we just need to practice. It's a good thing to get used to knowing how to do. It's really helpful. I use proportions in my life all the time with all kinds of things. So it's really useful. 100 times x. Remember, cross multiplying, you're multiplying the numbers that are across diagonally from each other. So 100x is equal to 15 times 14,725. And because for the sake of making this video not too long, I'm going to use a calculator, and you're allowed to use a calculator for projects. So I want to do 15 times 14,725. It's early. Keep messing up my words. So we still have 100x over here. We haven't done anything with that. And then this one is 220,875. Okay. And then, if you remember from before, if you don't, it's fine. I'm going to move this up. If you remember from before, when you have 100 times something equals this amount, that's like saying, okay, well, this divided by this will equal x. So it's a whole fact family where you have like, let's see, fact family example. You've got, let's see, you have 2 times 4 equals 8. That also means 8 divided by 2 equals 4, and 8 divided by 4 equals 2. So, if you do that in algebra form, it might look like 2x equals 8, which also looks like 8 divided by x equals 2, or 8 divided by 2 equals x. So we want this one right here. So if you look and you compare these things, this one right here is this, it's the same thing, it's just an easier problem. So this and this, they're the same format, it's just that this one is an easier problem. Because if you look at that and you go, okay, well 2 times something equals 8, well I know 2 times 4 equals 8. But if you say 100 times something equals that number, then it's not as easy. So in algebra, we write it as a fraction division problem. So remember, all fractions are division problems. So 100 divided by 100. We have to do it on this side because we're trying to solve for x, and then these two things are equal. So we have to divide by 100 on both sides. Because if you don't do the same thing to the other, if you don't do the same thing to both sides, one side's going to get real mad because they're supposed to be equal. If you do one thing for the other side and not for the other one, you're going to have a problem. Yeah. My brain isn't working so good this morning, if you can't tell. Okay, so I taught you that trick about moving the decimal for hundreds, but I'm just going to go ahead and divide it in the calculator. So that big number divided by 100 is 2208.75. So this x, we just found out what 15% of 14,725 is. So that's what I'm going to put here is 15% of 14,725 is 2,208.75. Okay, so I'm giving you a worksheet that has two of these because you have to do your state tax and your federal tax. Ooh, so you should label it. I should have labeled it for you, but let's say this one, this is her federal. This is federal. See, I use this federal table. And then if you keep going in your packet, you also have the state. So they're both, you do the math the same way, but one of them is federal and one of them is state. So you have to pay money to the government for like the whole United States, and then you have to pay the government for whatever state you live in. So we live in California, so I know some of you are living in different states. So if you want to find the state tax for the state that you've planned to live in for your project, that's fine. But you're welcome to use the California one if you want. That's it for that video. And stop.